Good morning, everyone. It's so great to be back for a coffee with friends today. And we've got a great guest, Samarth Mahajan, all the way from Mumbai. Now, we met Samarth last year when he applied to do the Edinburgh Pitch. And we got the chance to get to know Samarth a bit more through the workshops, pre-leading the pitch itself. And that's a great way of discovering new talent in the world, having people coming to pitch in Edinburgh. So Samarth just finished the film that he was pitching last year, and the film is being currently premiered at DOK.Fest Munich. So it's a great opportunity to bring Samarth into Europe, even if you cannot travel. So Samarth, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for, first of all, inviting me, Noe. I'm really glad, excited to be here. Even if, I'm not traveling physically, but just to be able to see you, just to be able to talk to you and talk to you about the film, which we were discussing 1 year ago, it's almost like homecoming, even though, I even last year we were meeting online, but it's just very nice to be here and to talking about the film.
So Samarth, you an Indian filmmaker based in Mumbai, but you actually your training was in technology. You graduated from the Institute of Technology, and then you self-taught yourself as a filmmaker. So tell us a little bit about this kind of shift. What is this passion of documentary filmmaking? How did you get that?
So it's pretty accidental. What happens in India right now is that before you become anything, you become an engineer. Like as soon as in case you score more than 90% marks in your classes, almost every second parent would want your kid to become an engineer because that's how the job market is in India. So becoming an engineer and going to an Indian Institute of Technology was like not a choice. It was more like this is destined to be. And but once I started working, once I got into my career, I was working with a company which produced cigarettes. So just to be there and just to be working on all the Excel sheets and making presentations about production, it all was very, it was very difficult to find any sort of meaning to it. And I was working in Calcutta. So Calcutta is a city full of life. So as soon as I would leave office and go outside, I would be very happy. Like on the streets, I would look at people and everyone seemed to have a story. And in my college, I used to do these short 1 minute ad films for interhall competitions. It was basically students competing against students. And we had no budgets. We used to make all these 1 minute, very amateur films just for fun. So, every time I would leave office and look at these people and remember those 1 minute amateurish, pointless films that we made, it used to really make me feel that maybe, I'm more inclined to work with a visual medium, to work with stories. That's how the shift happened. And if you see any typical Bollywood film, there is this notion of struggle. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna quit and move to Bombay, which is the city of dreams, and I'm gonna struggle it out. I'm gonna struggle to be a filmmaker. So luckily, I had my family is financially good enough to allow me to do that, which is very rare in India. Filmmaking is a privilege because we really don't have come from that kind of a country, but my family's been pretty fine, so they allowed me to come to Bombay. And luckily I met people and things have been working out. It's been almost 6 years since I started making films. Borderlands is actually my second feature documentary. So I did make a film in 2017, which was another feature length doc. So it's been happening. Like we've been able to manage and make films.
So last year you applied to Edinburgh Pitch. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience? Why did you decide to apply, and what did you get out of it? How did it help you kind of finishing this film?
Surely. So as documentary filmmakers in India, I think India itself has a very limited market or potential for documentary films. So most of us, like I think you probably have met other Indian filmmakers also. We really try and explore markets outside India. And as soon as you go online, you search for all these forums, and there are a bunch. And we found Edinburgh Pitch, and we decided to apply. And I think one of the good things that happened because of the forum is that one, we were able to take our film outside India and talk to you about it and understand your perspective on it. And I remember getting a lot of feedback and reality check about what works and what does not work in a film, and especially in terms of when we go to the market, when we go to someone like Arte, Al Jazeera, what do people actually think? And we had no exposure to that side of the markets because we are accustomed to, approaching Indian broadcasters and, looking at festivals here. But it sort of broadened our horizon as to, okay, these possibilities exist. These, commissioning editors exist. I didn't know there's this idea of sales agents. Like I had no idea. So I think for us it was a good training ground where Tracy Holder and you, I think you were the ones who sort of handheld us initially as to how do you create a compelling pitch. We got a lot of feedback on our pitch, and then we were able to do these one-on-one meetings, which really helped us understand. Okay, uh, what about the film is translating to them, what is not translating to them, and in case we want to explore these possibilities, what do we need to change about the pitch, about the film. So that I think has really helped us understand, put us in context to where we are as filmmakers in a global market. So that exposure really helped us, I think, and we continue to benefit from it. And we wouldn't know about a lot of festivals, a lot of markets without coming to Edinburgh.
So most of the film was self-finance, or just kind of little bits of kind of finance here and there. Tell us how challenging it is for an Indian filmmaker to be able to fund a documentary properly.
So I would say it's pretty challenging because there are few grants which are run by the government, but they're very small grants. Like, they would probably give you 5 to 6,000 euros, and then also expect all the rights of the film to be given away to them. So one, you're working with a very limited budget, and second, you stop having that kind of control and ownership of your film. So we crowdfunded almost half the project. Around 557 people contributed, and that also happened because our previous film had won a national award. So we were able to talk about our film in context to our previous body of work. So as a debut filmmaker, I wouldn't have probably been able to crowdfund that much of money. Now, the good thing is that Netflix and Amazon Prime, they've also come into India and they've started producing some of the nonfiction work. A lot of this nonfiction is actually it's like reality shows. Like there's a TV show called Fabulous Lives of Bollywood Wives. So you have these 4 wives of Bollywood stars, and they have shot with them, but it's more or less like a reality show. But the good thing is that at least there's this whole notion that, okay, nonfiction exists, and it maybe reality is interesting to watch. And one good progress that we've made, one of the producers on this film, there are 2 production houses, and one of them is Camera and Shots. They have managed to distribute a documentary series, a 3-episode documentary series through Netflix India. So there are, yeah, and that is beautiful, and that was trending #1 in the TV shows in India. So that's a positive sign. At the same time, like as I'm highlighting this, I think it's important to understand that this is one show which has managed to come on Netflix, and so the challenge is there, but I think we're making progress. With respect to funding opportunities, again, why something like an Edinburgh Pitch or any pitching forum is great for an Indian film is that you also get to meet all these funding organizations which internationally have money. And if, for example, the ITFA Bertha Fund or there's a Vickers Award for debutant filmmakers, which is run, I think, out of UK only.
Hmm.
You do not necessarily want rights to your films. In India, I think a lot of problem with at least the government grants is that they would just take away your rights.
Really?
So yeah. So for example, there are two. One is called the PSBT, the Public Service Broadcasting Trust,
Mhm.
and then there's the Films Division of India. Both of them, as I said, at max 6,000 euros and 7,000 euros. And not only will they take away the rights of your films, but you'll also have to pass your film through that government filter.
Mhm.
So imagine how many things you can't talk about
Mhm.
if you go down that line, because you want to be in the good books of your funders, who are basically the government, and many times what we're trying to say really wouldn't fit well with them. So yeah, so I think there are these two sides. One where there's a lack of funding,
Yeah.
people like us choose to crowdfund, and second is this idea of not wanting to lose control, not wanting to toe the government's line. So it's important for filmmakers like us to come to markets like Europe, come to markets like the US, and try and explore opportunities there so that our voice does not get compromised. So I think that is where Indian filmmakers are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Scotland, of course, very different situation than India, but for creative documentary filmmakers, we a little bit in the same situation in terms of we need to go internationally in order to be able to get co-finance for the film. Otherwise, there's no way you can get an entire film kind of financed in Scotland, unless you get a straight commission from television. But even that is very difficult because there are not that many slots for such films. So co-production is really, really important for everyone to learn how to do it and where to go and do it. That's for sure. The more we talk to each other, the more we're capable of supporting each other financially. So this is kind of great that you did manage somehow to finance the film, and you did manage to finish it. So before we get on talking about the film, then John, maybe you could show us a trailer just to because most people will not have seen the film unless they go to watch it online at the DOK.Fest Munich Festival. So this is a different trailer than the trailer you came to us to pitch. And of course, it's normal because it's kind of the Finnish film. So tell us about kind of what the film is about, Samarth.
So I think the basic idea was that whenever we're talking about borders, not only in the Indian subcontinent context, but if you see, Donald Trump talked a lot about the borders, and in UK there was a whole conversation around Brexit. Uh, the conversation became very detached from personal narratives of people who actually get affected by borders. Like in India, it's very common whenever we talk about very basic issues like jobs, inequality, or poverty, our leaders tell us that we shouldn't critique our country. Our army is protecting our borders. We should probably just support them and talk about the army. It's like a deflection tactic where there is this whole idea that our borders are very important and we need to secure them. But it's told in such a overt way, such a way that we just forget that there are actual people who live in these border areas and whose lives get affected by whatever we talk about border areas. So that was the idea, and so the film is really about people who get affected by borders, people who live in border areas. The approach is not so much with respect to just talking about physical borders, but in some ways understand borders in a personal sense also. And when I say that, it basically means to also understand different ways of people getting marginalized because of border areas. So some of our characters are actually not literally from borders, but in some ways their lives are connected to these borders. So that is what the film is about.
And when when you came and pitched, I mean, you said something really, really powerful because you made us imagine what it's like coming to, to only be able to see someone of your family, loved one, for just once a year and just for a few hours, because of kind of, borders. And in the film, you've got that moment where we see crowds kind of, on both sides of, I think it's a Bangladeshi and Indian border, where we see families kind of, gathering that kind of once a year, in order to pass over a little parcel, kind of, we've got the barbed wires and we've got this family. And there's so much joy there, kind of, meeting each other and seeing each other, that we could nearly forget about the sadness and the anger that one feels at seeing those borders. It's a very, very powerful moment in the film, and a very powerful thought of, making us think, what it's like to only meet someone that you love once a year. Of course, the world has changed because there's been kind of, invisible borders now as well as kind of visible borders. So, do you feel that an international audience is much more open now to understand the characters that you've got in the film?
So just in some ways, being able to screen in Germany and to be able to talk to you does make me feel that, these characters are talking to an international audience. At the same time, I think, and these are some conscious choices with respect to how the film is, that, we haven't used a lot of text in the film to explain certain contexts. Like, you've seen the film, so you know that you do, if you, and that was the idea behind the film, that we have these characters and they'll make you feel the context, and it's more to do with the feeling rather than the information. But I think that also limits the audience in a way that people who probably do not have context to the geography of the subcontinent, or specific context to how is an India-Pakistan border different from an India-Bangladesh border, may, if you're not into that feeling zone, you may start thinking, why is this so? And with the film, the idea is not to question that as much as just be with the characters and feel with them. So I think that one reality check is something that we're getting while we are promoting the film, while we're talking about the film, that those contexts which are missing may limit the audience to people who are patient enough to just be with the characters and see their journey. But emotionally, I think the characters do translate, and that is very important to me as a filmmaker, that if I am with this character who actually only sees her family once a year, can you feel that pain? Can you feel the joy when she passes oranges for her mother across the border? So I think those kind of moments do translate, and that really matters to me as a filmmaker. So we are just exploring how much, like, how we can just make sure that the film travels to different places. So even if, say, out of 10, 5 people were looking for that context, but the other 5 were probably just looking to connect with the characters. So those 5 are our audience. So that is what we are becoming sure of.
So tell us, how did the idea come up? The ideas of borders. I mean, what motivated you to to make the film?
So I come from a place which is 10 miles away from the border. And in fact, I am sitting at my home right now. That is where I'm sitting. I'm sitting about 10 miles from the India-Pakistan border. So like I said, whenever you hear anyone talk about border areas in a very external way, you start comparing it to your lived experience. And that is what used to happen a lot to me, because India-Pakistan border is supposed to be a very volatile border. So if you're sitting in Delhi and if you're sitting in Bombay, it's very easy for you to imagine that, maybe bombs are being thrown every day, and, it's a very hostile border. So we have enemies on the other side. At the same time, I come from the state called Punjab, which got partitioned. And culturally, I am much more connected to an average Pakistani than a lot of Indians who are actually racially different or they don't speak the same language. So, as a person who's lived in this area, I know that this idea of the other that we construct is very much, just a distraction tool. So, there was this urge to explore this idea of the other, which came from there. And although it started from the Pakistan border, there's a whole conversation in on the Bengal border where they say that we will send back all the illegal migrants, and the whole politics of that region is about sending back illegal migrants, which is also a conversation which keeps on happening, I think, in Europe, that we need to do something about the immigrants.
Yeah.
So the more I would read news, the more I would see things. It just made sense to explore these different topics in a way. So when I'm talking about that lady who meets her family only once a year, I think the idea is that who is an immigrant, because she had also crossed the border at some point. Now because there's a fence, and she's an Indian and her family is Bangladeshi. So I think these are the reasons why I thought that okay, it'll be interesting to explore borders through different lenses. So another lens became, how these borders divide people, but it also led to a lot of research where we found out that okay, there's a lot of trafficking also that happens. So how do people cope with that? And I think one of the things that became clear to us while we were making the film was this whole idea of just exploring how humans deal with borders in a hopeful way. Like the people, every character in the film is facing such odds which are stacked against them. Uh, for example, the girl who's been trafficked from Bangladesh to India, who's survived, and she's in a shelter home. And the song that plays in the film is actually a song that they play in the shelter home. It's something that they composed. So when we went in there, we thought, okay, this is going to be a very grim place. How are we going to talk to these girls, such young girls who've been trafficked? And at the same time, when we found out that they're creating music and her story is ultimately about finding love in that place, that those kind of encounters started motivating us to look at the film in that way, that even if there are borders, how do people overcome the barriers that these borders create? Because the idea was to then create like a personal politics around the film and take the conversation away from all these leaders who are using these borders as distraction tools. And like all of it connecting to me being from a border area, and like me also shooting with my mother, because in spite of living in a border area, she's never been to a border area, which again was a very basic conversation I had while doing the pre-production for the film. And I was just amazed because that's the kind of life women live in India. And to see my mother in that way was also motivation. Like, so it was just like a lot of things in my head, and it's because in hindsight, it's very difficult when you're living through these different thoughts. How did it come to be the final film? But if I was to structure it, there was a personal motivation, there was an external motivation, and a lot of research which led into what became the film.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, as you say, most borders, it's kind of, about violence, really, and about war. Kind of, I'm not just talking about India, but in the world in general, it's always a conflict zone when we talk about borders and think about borders. But you actually decided to go for female characters and to try to explore kind of the experience of that imposition that a border is. But for women, why did you decide to have female characters?
So I think inherently the image of a border is very masculine. As soon as you say the word border or imagine a border, the idea is okay, there will be some army men standing there, and it's a very male-oriented space. So because from the beginning we were combating that image, like my single line thing would be, okay, why do we only talk about army and terrorists? Why don't we talk about other people who live there? So inherently the idea was, I think, to challenge masculinity in a way. And although it was not a conscious choice, but because we were battling that idea again and again. So wherever we went, we were looking for softer aspects And we just, I think, found it easier to bring out those softer aspects through the stories that we finally found. India and the Indian subcontinent being, like, I think the whole world is patriarchal. But I do think in a place like India, that patriarchy is very overt at some places. So if you're looking for those softer aspects, automatically you get attracted to these narratives of, you know, like a girl facing, the whole shift that, one of our characters has, who's come from Pakistan. She's just trying to be a doctor and she's just trying to learn a new language. Now, all the men in her family used to be daily laborers. So they used to leave the house anyhow. So they were working. So automatically, when we were at their home, she was the only person we could actually talk to. So, and she actually had an aspiration and she was struggling to challenge that whole idea that, I just want to be educated. And she's there for the first 40 seconds in the trailer. So I think that's another thing when we are at Indian borders, because men are so shielded, or they're outside their homes. We also found it easier to be at the home and be interacting with women. One of the things I really like to acknowledge is, like, my whole direction team, except for me, all were women. Like, my associate director is a girl, Nupur Agarwal, and all these stories are shot in different languages. So at every place we had a local associate director. And again, it was not a conscious choice, but maybe just because the initial idea is to just battle that very fixed, hyper masculine, violent image, that all my associate directors turned out to be women. When we were going to all these places, we were meeting women, and they had like more emotional stories. So I think that's how it happened.
How did you get them to agree to be in the film? I mean, I'm thinking, especially, what's her name? Kavita. Kavita has, well, kind of, she was a victim of human traffic, wasn't she? So, I mean,
Kavita, she's the one who's at the Nepal border and stopping other women from getting trafficked.
oh, but she herself kind of had experience, no, being
She
trafficked.
did, but that's not part of the film.
No,
But
okay.
Noor, who's from Bangladesh, who's in the shelter home, she was the one who got trafficked, and she's in a shelter home where all the women, all these young girls are awaiting repatriation. So we had Noor, whose face we don't show in the film. She was the one who was trafficked
Yeah.
and then rescued.
Because I mean that's quite a vulnerable kind of position to be. So how do you get such character to agree to be part of the film when they are in such kind of vulnerable situation, and how do you look after that character to make sure that you as a director don't kind of abuse that vulnerability?
So I think what was very important to us initially was to, before we start shooting, we get to know all our characters and meet them without this whole pressure that, we've come in with the camera and we're going to start shooting with you. So, and one of the things we did to gain trust was also to go through people they already trusted. So when we went to this shelter home, the not-for-profit organization which runs the shelter home, we met the founders, and we first convinced them. We showed them our past work and we told them our approach, and I think it was first them who had to trust us, and then we were introduced to all the girls in the shelter home through the founders, through these not-for-profit founders. And then the process was that, yes, we had this direction team where like my associate director there was Joyona. So Joyona and I would talk about, how do we approach, and how, because a constant question we would get was, will this help us, will this help us get repatriated? And that's a very tricky question, because although we do want to use the film as an advocacy tool and tomorrow make sure that, all these girls do get uh, repatriated, at the same time it's too much of a promise while making the film, to promise that, yes, because just because you're participating in the film, we will uh, get you to your home. So I think the important thing for us was to be honest. So we were honest with them, and we tried to just make it fun for them. Like we said, at the least, what will happen is you'll sit with us and you'll have this friendly conversation and just make a friend. And I think that was our approach with most of our characters. We wouldn't make big promises that we're going to change your life, because a lot of them were going through these things. But we would tell them that yes, we'll sit with you. We want to know you. We want to tell us about ourselves. So the idea was to make friends with them. So I think that we were able to do in a way. So we would be very much conscious that we don't want to shoot parts that they don't want uh, people to know. And for example, especially with the survivor of trafficking, we didn't want to go into the gory details of what they went through. This one, I think people are aware, and it just puts them in a very, very, very vulnerable space where they feel obliged to tell those dark details to us. And we were not looking for that. What we were looking for was, especially with respect to someone like a survivor, how do they cope with this whole confinement, actually, because our focus was, even when you've survived, you are now confined because you crossed a border. You have to wait for a few years in that confined space to get repatriated. So I think just having that focus, that we are focused on confinement and we don't want to objectify their stories in a way. And I think we were able to make them feel that yes, we will deal with them sensitively. And then yes, we did a proper process of getting consent, uh, especially in a tricky situation like a shelter home. So I think that also is like a contract that we did with them, and so they would have thought that yes, these people are being careful and will probably not misuse our
Well, they
footage.
certainly kind of filmed with plenty of respect. I mean, there's something really strong about all those kind of characters. Despite what happened to them, they don't they don't appear as victims, but as kind of strong women who can overcome the situation. So that's really. As a woman, it's great to be able to see women depicting that way. But I'm curious about this human trafficking linked to the Nepalese kind of border. Is this kind of something kind of special to that area, or is it, or it happens in other borders, but you just happen to go and film it in that border?
So I think it happens across many borders in India, but two of the hotspots are the Nepal and Bangladesh border. Why is it so is also related to the nature of the border, which we were also trying to explore through different stories. Like some of the borders in the film are very strict borders, some of the borders are open. So with Nepal, the interesting thing is that it's an open border.
Oh.
So because it's an open border, and you see Kavita, who's rescuing other women from getting trafficked, and there's a whole interception scene in the film. Uh, she is just standing at the road and looking at people passing by, right? So because it's an open border, there's no check on what is happening. And Nepal, being economically, poorer than India, India is like the place of opportunity for a lot of young women. So, and a similar thing exists on the Bangladesh border, but although Bangladesh border, we have a fence, people find ways to cross the border. So that's how women in that shelter home are coming to India and, getting trapped. So there are these two different types of borders, yet because of an economic gradient, women do get trafficked. And we tried to capture both of them, actually. So you see Kavita on the Nepal border trying to rescue women, and someone on the Bangladesh border who's actually, in a shelter home now, who was in the past victim, now is a survivor of trafficking. But yeah, I think it's a lot to do with the economic situation in the subcontinent, and India being this, because it's so vast, it has more opportunity. So younger women, many of them are aspirational. Like a lot of a recurring thread that we would find is that okay, these were young women who wanted jobs in India, and because there's a middleman involved or a middle woman involved, they are the ones who are actually promising them jobs, but then taking them somewhere else. And that's what happened with our character. Like Noor was trafficked by her aunt, and the interception that Kavita does on the Nepal border, uh, the girl who's crossing, the girl she stops, she actually says that, I am with my aunt. And so it's a very common thing that relatives would do, which is sort of even more tragic. That it's, you can't trust your family because your family might be the one who's trafficking you.
Wow.
So
That's
it's
a lot
pretty.
kind of, to take in really. So of course, kind of, we all know that COVID's been affecting kind of, India very badly. What does it mean in terms of borders? I mean, what has borders kind of been reinforced, or the opposite? They're kind of, being more opened, abandoned, and therefore more potential kind of, trafficking, like, with Nepal. What's the situation like?
So as of now, I think we've closed all our borders, and we did that last year in March, because we wanted to stop COVID from getting transmitted. So I think in a way, COVID is helping the guards, helping people. But the interesting thing is that many of the girls who we met, they were actually ready to take the risk. You know why? Because they really want those jobs, and that is what is very unsettling about maybe the economic situation in the subcontinent, that people are actually ready to take that risk. They are very much aware that if they are choosing to cross from Nepal or Bangladesh to India, this is a distinct possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So as an outsider who doesn't want women to get trafficked, I think COVID is doing great. But the strange reality is that if you were to go back to the women who are potentially going to get trafficked, they would rather have open borders and cross the border and possibly get a job. For them, it's a probability game.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I think, as a filmmaker, it's unsettling. Obviously, as even someone who's thinking from the whole idea that this is something grave that happens, but the odds are such, people, the options are so limited, and a job is really something that is cherished.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it is not only specific to the subcontinent. If you see Qatar, where I think the football World Cup is going to happen, you have so many films coming out about the living conditions of the labor there, because they're pretty much living like slaves.
Yeah.
And in spite of knowing that you're probably going to live like a slave, a lot of people agree to that lifestyle. So
Because
it's really complicated.
I mean, what is the alternative, basically?
Yeah, so I think for a lot of people, it's not an option to just stay at home, and I wish it was. I honestly wish it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think COVID is helping reduce trafficking numbers. At the same time, it's creating this distinct situation in the subcontinent where a lot of the youth is unemployed, and I don't think we have the kind of leaders right now who can channelize that energy very well. So in India, for example, you have a lot of protest movements, and there's a growing farmers protest, and a lot of it has to do with COVID leading to a lot of people realizing that they're actually out of jobs, and they're questioning governments. So that is also happening, which is, I think it was required since a long time, because we just weren't questioning our leaders, especially in India.
Mm. So, did you manage? I mean, because of COVID, the distribution of a film is very challenging. But did you actually manage to show the film in India? And what kind of response did you have from your Indian audience?
So we were still talking to OTT players here. We are waiting for it to premiere in India at a festival. So we have the Mumbai Film Festival, which is actually a good place to start showcasing your film in India.
Yeah.
So we're waiting, because what happens around that festival is you get some hype and you get some people to review the film.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to use that conversation, as well as using this international festival stint to create hype around the film. So that is something that we are still building up. In India, getting distribution for a single documentary film is something of like there's no formula to it right now, although we're trying to create that formula. But our expectation is that if we can get enough people to talk about the film and critics to talk about the film, it'll probably be an easier pitch. So I would say we're still creating that hype graph around the film. So
I was also wondering about kind of neighboring countries. I mean, what kind of response they would do. I mean, showing the film in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in kind of, Nepal, kind of, what reaction do you think that the film could create?
no, actually, I am also curious, and that's something that we'll have to explore over the next 1 year to make sure that it goes to as many festivals as possible. For example, in in Nepal, we actually have a good festival called Film South Asia, which is probably the only festival where filmmakers from all the neighboring countries come. And Nepal being such a neutral country, uh, you know, as an Indian filmmaker, I can meet a Pakistani filmmaker and sit in the same place in Nepal, which is very difficult to do in India or Pakistan. So the idea is to explore these spaces and from there on explore, where can we show it in Nepal? How can we take it to more and more people? Because as a filmmaker, I am not aware if there is a broadcaster in Nepal who's showcasing documentaries. But can we utilize more and more festival spaces to at least say reach 10,000 people, to reach 20,000 people? So that is the approach. So we've already submitted to those places, and I am talking to those programmers, and I just hope it at least goes to all these circles. And no matter these circles ultimately end up being elite circles. They are not the people who would watch mainstream films. Like in Nepal, there's a big market for Bollywood films, but so it's more like a exploration of a nascent space, and we're almost trying to stretch the space in a way. That's something like, honestly, if we meet 1 year later, I'll have such a better answer to how are Bangladeshis reacting to it, how are Nepalis reacting to it. And I really want to also talk about, yeah.
What's interesting about your film, I mean, also it's very topical because everyone is talking about borders. It's not, unfortunately, the problem of borders is not going to go away. I think it's with us kind of, for many more years to come. And if nothing else, I mean, many more borders kind of, seem to move into conflict and create kind of a lot of human distress kind of. So I think your film can travel kind of to many countries who are facing kind of such problems, and hopefully would be a nice way to reflect kind of about their own borders kind of. So yeah, we're coming to the end, and I wanted to make sure that people did have kind of an opportunity to ask you questions. So if anyone wants to ask a question to Samarth directly, please kind of just speak up. If not, if you are being ultra shy, then you can go and post something in the chat box, which is another possibility. And while kind of you doing that, then I'll just kind of keep asking a few more things that I want to ask Samarth. So
No,
Samarth, kind of go on. Sorry.
yeah, I think you touched upon this when we were talking about how these borders are gonna stay, and the topicality of the film. One of the things I really wanted the film to have, which has helped us with the censor board in India, because we did get a censor certificate, which is like it can actually be shown to kids in India also.
Mm.
Was to not do name calling. We actually not made it about the current political party or uh, any one single political leader that they are bad, or this is because of them. Most of the stories that we've captured it's been the same reality for more than 60 years or 70 years, the existence of these borders. So we've tried to focus on those kind of stories. So I do hope, like, even after 10 years, it seems relevant in that way.
Yeah.
I think we do have a question.
Yeah, we do. This is from Dean. Hi, Dean, who says, did Samarth have any issues filming the scenes around the border and the shelter? What workarounds were used to gain access?
So actually, the whole story that we were discussing about families meeting at the border only once a year, we technically needed permissions to shoot everything. But the way, the at least India works, it's very difficult to get anyone to write you a permission, because no one wants to take a risk that 1 year later their boss is going to ask who signed this letter. So every time we would be at a border, we would meet the local border security forces, and because we are Hindi speakers, Hindi happens to be the language of most of these guards, and we would be in areas where locals don't speak that language. So instantly there would be this familiarity, and people would be very happy. They would feel that, oh, people from, people speaking the same language have come in this area. So we would be offered very good food, and, very, very, people would offer us alcohol also. But they wouldn't give us the permissions. So ultimately, it was like just managing relationships that, we will not stretch much, and we just had to promise them that, we are not going to say something against the border security force, just help us. It was very much under the table kind of dealings that, just help us, we are good people. So it was just, I think the only workaround was we just kept on meeting all these border security force people, and also bragging about our education, because going to an Indian Institute of Technology is a big deal in India, because people really respect young people who've been educated. They would be like, yes, we are IIT graduates, and as soon as we would drop that name, people would take us much more seriously, because they want their kids to go to an IIT. so the logic would become that, okay, if, I think I'm just thinking from the officer's point of view, that if I help this young man, tomorrow, I can talk to him about how can I get my kid to the college. So it was more or less like relationship management in that sense.
It's an interesting way of making film.
So that way my engineering education really helps sometimes, because most of our crew actually went to that college. So
you see, that's why we all need to be engineers to start with. Respect.
We have one more question.
Yeah. You may be seeing that from Shriyansh, who says it's not a movie-related question, but they're wondering, how do you manage your finances in your life? Because you're one of the prominent institutions in India. There's no money, in my understanding, in India. I don't know much you want to talk about your own finances, but it's up to yourself. And maybe there's a little bit of a question we could ask as well about just financing for films.
Surviving as a filmmaker. How do we make a living as filmmakers?
Yes.
So that idea is
easy, I'm sure.
I think I understand where the question comes from, because the only reason why people go to the college that I went to is get a good high-paying salary. And if I do not take that job and end up making films, then it's very difficult to translate that to a lot of my own relatives, and they think, is this kid crazy? Because he would have gotten a well-paying job, and in India it's a big deal to be able to and interestingly, we get a lot of questions about finances. Like random strangers also ask me this question, so I don't find it awkward actually. It's something that we just like to talk about in India, that how are you managing your life. So I think that's where crowdfunding came in. I think at some point, like half the film was done through crowdfunding, because there is no structured financing around films, And there is obviously some sort of compromises in terms of lifestyle that you have to do. Like I cannot just buy a car, and I would rather use local transportation. So I'll have to make those lifestyle changes to make sure that, okay, whatever field that I've chosen, am I able to make sure that like the financial potential of it meets my lifestyle. So I probably wouldn't compromise on my chicken curry. Like I'm gonna have chicken curry thrice a week. But okay, I'm probably not gonna hire a private cab to go to certain places. So it's that kind of a space. But yeah, I think this much is enough to talk about the financial aspect. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, also the crowdfunding, we that is a huge subject which we've only got a few minutes left on the talk really, but I think it's fascinating for filmmakers, and I just wonder, is there anything you wanted to say more about the crowdfunding, just again in the last sort of 3 or 4 minutes, that maybe would inspire other people, or the pros and cons?
The pros and cons of crowdfunding.
Yeah, maybe.
So I think one of the biggest pros is that you have complete control of your film. Even after you've crowdfunded, it really empowers you. One is, as a filmmaker, it really inspires you that so many people believe in your idea and believe in your approach, that they are ready to sort of give you money and not expect anything in return. And another pro is that you create an organic audience around your film. Because as soon as so many people get to know about your film during the campaign, these are the people who are most excited about watching it when it comes out. And I think that also again really helps a film which has been crowdfunded. So we have an organic group of well-wishers, who I also keep updated, and they keep on writing me very nice mails. And as a filmmaker, it's, especially as a documentary filmmaker in India, it's so nice to hear people say good things about your updates. So I think crowdfunding creates that whole positive vibe around the film. The con, I think, is that it's not sustainable. Like it would just tire me out to be crowdfunding for every film. I crowdfunded for this film because I was in love with the idea. I had a personal connection that, okay, I come from a border area, and it just seemed like a very important film to make. So I was like, okay, I'm going to crowdfund and I'm going to go out and ask people for contributions. But to be doing it for another project is going to be very difficult. One is because, half the people who contributed, they're going to be the same people. So it's just tiring for them also. Like if I keep on going back and seeing that, why don't now I have another idea and I am burning equally to make this film. So why don't you give me another set of crowdfunding money? So, but yeah, I think everyone could do it once is what I feel. At least for one film in your life, you should probably do that whole drill. It really puts you in this zone of putting yourself out. And I think it really helped us, like when we came to a place like Edinburgh Pitch, or, later on we went to the Hong Kong Asia Film Financing Forum. Because of the crowdfunding, we were already so used to pitch. So that indirectly again helped us. I think the whole idea of just putting yourself out. So yeah, I'm pretty glad that we crowdfunded for this film, because I don't know any other way this would have been made. So as you know, a lot of the commissioning agents and sales agents from the beginning itself, they are so almost so sure that, there should be one protagonist, or there should be one very simple to follow conflict in the film. My film has 6 characters, and the conflicts are all so unique. And this is again a feedback that, Tracy kept on giving me. And I think we also discussed that in your pitch, don't try and tell so many things. But inherent to the idea is that if I don't tell certain amount of things, when you watch the actual film, you'll feel that I lied, because I just did not tell that, there are going to be 6 characters. And, as soon as I said 6 characters, a lot of these meetings, people are, their eyes are like, oh, 6 characters. So with a crowdfunding kind of a setup, I wouldn't get that kind of a question, because people's motivation of putting in money is not to later on sell it to an audience. Their motivation is coming from the idea that, yes, your film is talking about issues which are important to our society. You've been doing this for some time. We saw your previous film and really liked it. So in that sense, I think it's, for a film like this, it's very important to explore that possibility. Otherwise, it may not even get made.
Great, thanks for that. And we have just gone over 11 o'clock. Maybe people have to go, but we also just have one last question. I don't know if this is easy to answer quickly. You're maybe seeing it there. I think the shortened version really, it's not a long question, but how can someone get into filmmaking in India? Is there an easy way? I don't think there's an easy way, but I don't know how you want to answer that.
I think it's the way our industry is working. Most of the times you'll see filmmakers who weren't educated in films. Mostly 95% of them are engineers. So, so I think the only way of becoming a filmmaker in India is to just start doing it. Even if you have a very basic DSLR or a phone, the idea is to start shooting. And I think there's no structured way. There are film schools, but even people who go to film schools, when they come out, they start out with their own films without much support. So it's more about just being smart about it. In India, we have this word called jugaad. Jugaad is just managing with the bare minimum kind of situations. Like you have no money, no equipment, and yet you have to just make it. So in fact, our previous film, which was my first feature film, it was a film made at a budget of 3,000 euros, and 3,000 euros is nothing, right? And we were just 4 people, and it was just about traveling in the 3rd class of Indian Railways and talking to people. So they're just literally just talking heads. We have 11 or 12 of these characters. So there was no plan, no pre-production, no storyboarding, no questionnaire. We were just traveling for 17 days in these trains, and the tickets are dirt cheap. For €1, you can travel half the breadth of India. It's that kind of cheap. So I have only that example. And I know some filmmakers who just decide to do it. So I don't know any other way. I think another important thing is that asking for help and finding people to collaborate with. And many times what we have seen is that these collaborators will work with you for like a very cheap price in that sense. Like they may be charging a lot of money for commercial work, but if they like your idea, they'll either sometimes work for free with you or they'll charge very less money. And that is something everyone needs to explore in a space like India where you have less money for independent films. A lot of the music that we got for our previous and current films, we got it for free because the musicians just really liked the film. And that can become a big chunk of your budget if you create original music or if you are licensing money. So jugaad is the word. And I think the idea is to work with very limited resources and make the best out of it.
Very good advice.
I think that's that. It's the same for everywhere in the world, isn't it? I think it's the same in Scotland as well, really. But get your phone and just go outside and start filming, and then there's YouTube. So
yeah,
put things on YouTube and Twitter. And anyway, okay, we are over by 5 minutes, but I think that was really fascinating. So thank you. I'll let Noe.
Well, thank you, Samarth. It's such a pleasure, kind of listening to to you and sharing your experience with us in Scotland. And I really wish you the very best for the distribution of Borderlands. And as I said before, hopefully we will get to see it live in Scotland at some stage. So we'll work towards that. And I really look forward to welcome you back at Edinburgh Pitch with your next project, whatever you decide to do.
I would really, really, really love to actually also watch my film live because till now all the screenings are online. And I'm really glad that we did this. I'm very happy that you thought about doing this session. So I'm like so glad to talk to you about the film. And I do hope that at some point physically, we get to sit together and just, relax and
a cup of chai would be
yeah.